I have been asked why devotions, and so let me create a context for where the devotions come from and why I take the time. Let me go way back. I grew up in a religious family. The first church we attended when I was a little boy, they didn't allow musical instruments, so this gave me really kind of a distorted view of God. A God who doesn't like instruments, a God who's old-fashioned, a God who's out of style, irrelevant, whatever words. And so I kept the form, but I lost the heart. And that was my first 20 years of life. And then a radical thing happened, and I don't know how else to say it, but I fell in love with God. I realized that He was what I was looking for, that it wasn't about rules, it wasn't about fear. Really, the only reason I'd been hanging out with Jesus, or church really, was that I didn't want to go to hell. And I realized that hell wasn't the issue, that relationship was. And I wanted to love Him. So I was doing a discipleship training school with YWAM, and one of the staff came to me and said, "Hey, Matt, you want to come to Saipan and start a new base there?" I said, "Sure." I mean, I knew I couldn't go home, because to go home would be just to go back into the life that I wasn't happy in, and I didn't want to do that. I felt compelled to find a way to love God with all of my heart, soul, mind, and strength. And it was as if something had awakened within me, and I wanted to watch over that. So I went to Saipan, and I spent the first 3 years there in Saipan. And I would get up almost every morning early. I would get out a Strong's Concordance, a black notebook, and my Bible. And a Strong's Concordance lists every place where there is a word. So if you're looking at the word right, it would tell you every description of the Bible where the word right, righteous, righteousness is listed. And there'd be a long list of those words. This is kind of very early days of computers, and there was no computers could really do this. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to love Him, I want to get to know Him. And I would wake up every morning, and I would begin to work through the attributes of God. I would begin to look at righteousness and justice as the foundation of His throne. Loving kindness and truth go before Him. He's a God who's long-suffering, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness. And all of these attributes, I began to just soak in them, to hold them in my spirit as I wrestled with, well, what does it mean that He's slow to anger? Because I had always thought He was quick to anger. What does it mean that He has indignation every day, and that indignation is anger roused at injustice? What does it mean that He valued His word so much that He would die to maintain the integrity of His word? That Jesus' death in part was love for us, and in part was the integrity of the kingdom. What does it mean that He's patient? How does an infinite God be patient? So I began studying every day the attributes of God, and began to read wherever I could find on the attributes of God. And I did that for years. I began to teach on it. That's where my teaching on the nature and character of God grew out of. We started a discipleship training school down there. We didn't have any teachers, so I began to teach. And I've been teaching on the nature and character of God for 38 years, probably. And it's still the core, the foundation that I work from. And everything I'm doing, I keep going back. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have survived the PhD process where you're taught to question everything. Well, 4 or 5 years ago, I was wrestling with this whole thing of devotions and kind of, how do I help people get something, a bite-sized chunk of God that would provoke, challenge, and stir their thinking and stir them at a heart level to kind of wrestle with things. And periodically would read different devotions, and I felt stirred in my heart that, why don't I try writing devotion? And I thought, shoot, why not? So it began a journey for me. I would wake up early. Again, morning is my best time. I wake up early and began to just go back over my notes, go back over my core teaching, go back over things and say, okay, how do I do this? How do I say this? How do I communicate? And I set kind of a goal that I'm going to keep it around 300 words, which is, 2.5 minutes at most reading. Now, a part of my motivation, I took a test years ago, and it's to break things down into their essence. I like complexity, and what I like to do is take complexity and reduce it to what's the essence of the thing we're struggling with here. And what I found was 300 words was perfect because it allowed me to get an idea, get a scripture, get something that I was wrestling with or had been wrestling with for years. You say, okay, what's the essence of it? And then I'd try to write it, and I'd write it in a goal of 300 words, sometimes a few more, sometimes a few less. So it really was rooted in trying to give people a focus on the character of God. How do we love God? What are the issues involved with it? Who are we? And what do we discover about ourselves when we see Him? How can we get a collective sense of viewing God and loving Him and dealing with pain? Because a lot of what I do in my coaching and organizational development and my business, working with people and organizations, is help them work through where they're stuck, and people are often stuck in pain. So a lot of the things I'm dealing with in devotions have to do with issues that I either have struggled with personally, or I help people struggle with, or I know that are issues as I read the Bible and have just kind of come alive to me over the years. So the devotion is really a chance for you to get a meaty bite of something that, not to answer questions, really is to give you a seed, to give you something for the day, or if you're going to chew on it all week, whatever, you get it and then you chew on it and you think about it and you ponder it and you reflect it. And then you grow your own fruit out of growing that seed. I have no desire to answer all your questions in the sense of a theological. I only have a desire to help you understand what are the issues that are involved in this, what are the conditions of the soil, of the environment, and how to plant the seeds, and then how to grow them, and what's the faith needed to be able to do that. So I trust as you explore the devotions, put them out daily, and I trust they stir you, they get you starting to think about something, and that you carry that in the day with you. And be asking God, how do we do this? What does this look like? And what are the questions I want to ask? And how do I do this in regards to the business or the family or the work that you're involved in? I trust that they stir you. And I have to say this, if for no other reason, I have truly been blessed, because what they have done is they have stirred me. They have awakened within me a new and fresh, a passion for God, a love for God, a sense that I adore you. And the more I study Him, the more intrigued I am by things that were words years ago, but there's this color, beauty, depth to it, and I think, oh man, I don't know how I missed that, but it's more beautiful than I even thought. I trust that you'd find yourself discovering that in these months, maybe even years ahead. Thanks. God bless you.